Put that coffee down.
I'm not here to waste your time, okay? I certainly hope you're not here to waste mine. So I'm gonna keep this short.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
Coffee's for closers only.
Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the Behind Your Back podcast with me, Bradley Hartman. This podcast, we talk about leadership, very specifically today with our guest, Mr. Brian Biro. We talk about leadership, personal productivity, time management, and the craft of selling in the construction industry. This episode is brought to you by Boise Cascade Engineered Wood Products. They help you move faster and build stronger. They make it easier to get more done. And our friends at Materials Exchange. They're the LBM industry's answer to E-Trade. Materials Exchange is your digital marketplace for lumber and panels. So I'm thrilled to bring to you today my conversation with Mr. Brian Biro. This will be one of the conversations that you listen to, and if it was anything like it was for me, you look down and before you know it, 15, 20, 25 minutes have gone by, especially if you're listening to this at like 1.5 speed. Time flies because Brian is insightful, he's energetic, he tells great stories, and had an absolute blast listening to him talk about leadership and specifically the ROI, the return on investment of kindness. Now, that's not only an idea, a powerful one at that, it's the title of his new book. So who is Brian Biro? He is America's breakthrough coach. Brian has delivered over 1,800 presentations around the world over the last 30 years and has connected with almost 750,000 people. Brian is the author of 14 books, including his bestseller, Beyond Success, as well as his brand new book that we're talking about here, The ROI of Kindness. Brian has degrees from Stanford University and UCLA, and we touch upon his personal relationship with what I would argue the greatest coach of all time, Mr. John Wooden. Brian shares something really impactful about the yield sign that we see alongside the road and how we generally see with our memory and conditioning instead of our eyes. We talk about how we can be fully present as leaders to be more effective, regardless of how little or much time we spend with individuals in our family or on our team. We talk about humility, about it being modeled and taught, and Brian believes it can. And since Brian is America's breakthrough coach, I ask him to describe any first questions that you as a listener might be able to ask yourself and answer for yourself to begin your own breakthrough. You're going to find, like I did, this is incredibly motivational and inspirational. And when you're done, you are going to be a better leader. So for that reason, I'm thrilled to bring to you my conversation with Mr. Brian Biro. So Mr. Brian Biro, welcome to the show.
Bradley, it's great to be here. I'm excited to be with you. I already enjoyed our connection off air, so I'm excited about being on air.
Yeah, likewise. And I found your book here that we're going to be talking about, The ROI of Kindness, for more reasons than one. Seems like a very timely book, and I just really enjoyed it. So I appreciate you making time for us to walk through it and share some of the insights. And I found it also inspirational. It made me want to be a better leader, and gave me some very tactical things that I can do. And sometimes some of these things that we know we should do, but we don't do enough. Maybe let's just start right here is, what was the genesis for this book? And maybe share just a little bit about your relationship with Mac Anderson.
Sure. Mac is a great guy. So Mac has started a company that's called Inspired Kindness. Okay. Mac is some of your viewers might know of him. He started a company years ago called Successories,
absolutely,
which was a very huge success. They're inspiring posters that would frame posters, and then another called Simple Truths, where he wrote a lot of. They published a whole bunch of great books. A book like called The Dash, which born dash died. The dash is what counts. Okay. The 212th degree, which, yes, at 211 degrees, you got hot water. 212 degrees, you can move a train. Mm-hmm. So I got to know Mac because I've been a professional speaker for 30 years. We hit it off right away. We both have this incredible passion that never in our lives have we seen more of a need to remember the power of kindness, and also to understand that many people, everyone wants kindness, Bradley. We want to be treated kindly. We want to feel kind to others. However, there is a long-term conditioned belief in business that kindness is weak, that kindness is soft, that kindness doesn't really work in business. And I wanted to blow that false belief out of the water with real facts, with real truth, with the show that not only does kindness sort of work, kindness is perhaps the single most important ingredient in building an unstoppable team, and it goes to the bottom line, and it's long term. So the real fire in me about this was never in my life have I seen more unkindness than I have over the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah. My mentor, who I know we'll talk about a little bit more, my dear friend John Wooden, the greatest coach of all time, used to say, we can disagree without being disagreeable. Yeah. And we seem to have lost that. And I really want to help to get that back. I really want to help create an environment where kids are brought up to understand that kindness is not a maybe. Kindness is a must, not just in our families, but in our businesses, in our communities, in our hearts. So that's really the emphasis. It's pure inspiration. And here's the simple truth. If you're not inspired, you're on the way to getting expired. So my inspiration is to make a dent in the false belief and to transform it so people understand, hey, this is a key to success, whatever industry you're in.
Well, I love that. And kind of preparing for this, I shared with you a little bit before we flipped the mics on. When I travel around the country, also internationally, I will stop at a local university and buy a pennant. So getting ready for this, you can see over my shoulder, not great for the audio medium, I understand, but put up the UCLA pennant because John Wooden is a legend. And when we were in LA, my wife and I, we made a dedicated trip to campus. So I get a picture in front of his statue. I think, especially for our audience of construction professionals, this idea about kindness being soft really resonated with me. But I also think when you look at someone like John Wooden, say, oh, well, won 7 championships in a row. He won 10 in 12 years. He's recognized as one of the greatest coaches in any sport of all time. Well, I want to be like him. Is there any story that comes to mind that resonates with you as you think about your interaction with John Wooden, where you say really exemplifies both the leadership characteristic, but also kindness?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got dozens of stories about him. I interacted with him a lot when I wrote my first book, which was called Beyond Success. Yeah. Was based upon his pyramid of success. I guess the first thing I would say is you kind of really said it. This is the greatest of all time. He was the greatest of all time. No one would question that in his field. No other coach in men's college basketball history has won more than 5 national championships. Happens to be Coach K, who announced his retirement just recently. Right. And John Wooden won 10 in 12 years. But here's the truth. He would have been the first to tell you he didn't win any in the first 27 years that he coached. He used to say it's what you learn after you know everything that makes the difference. So what I love about the example of John Wooden was here's a guy who was in a very competitive environment, the most successful of all time, and yet he was the kindest person I ever met. When you were with John Wooden, you felt like the important one. You felt like the star because he made you feel that way. He exemplified virtually every one of the 7 habits of kindness that I write about in the book. A fun story that also demonstrates who he really is. When Bill Walton was a senior, so Bill Walton, one of probably the 2 greatest college players of all time, along with Kareem, same school, same coach. At any rate, senior year, he comes in, he's the returning National Player of the Year. You'll like him because red hair, we got that thing going on.
Of course, right.
And he was a character, but he walks into practice on the first day of practice his senior year. He says, Coach, with all due respect, many of us are now over 21, and we believe that we should be able to wear facial hair as we like. Coach Wooden had a no facial hair rule, and the reason was he felt that it collected sweat more, and it would lead to a turnover, and a turnover could turn the game. Simple rule. And Coach Wooden walks up to him and says, Bill, I've never been more proud of a player in my life. A man has got to stand up for what he sees as right, and we're really going to miss you. And 15 minutes later, he came Walton back from the locker room, clean shaven. Those sideburns didn't come until he got to Portland. But there's a perfect example of he didn't get angry, he didn't get aggressive. He just was clear, straight, honest, and he meant it. He had so many great comments that he would make. He really lived his principles. Probably the most important one was that I look at John Wooden is you can tell the quality of a person by the way he treats those who can do nothing for them. Mm-hmm. And John Wooden would be as kind to anyone because he knew that that was the correct way to live our lives, and it worked. Again, remember, this is not just talking about what a wonderful guy he was, but the most successful guy in the history of his field. That should be a clue that kindness works.
Well, and I thought you did a really good job with that in the book of citing specific examples in different industries and tying it back to, if you need another reason to be kind to the people that you're spending a majority of your time with, okay, fine, let's do that. Let's think about, obviously, the return on the investment. Let's look at profit dollars. Let's look at turnover. Let's look at retention. The one thing that I saw early on, and I was chuckling with myself, and I've literally thought it every day since I read it. So I'm going on about 2 weeks. Very near my home, we have a little roundabout that has a yield sign. And you said in the book, like, you're going to chuckle out loud. And I'm like, all right, let's see. And that's exactly what happened. Would you mind going into detail why you encourage everyone listening to become, quote unquote, world-class yield sign finders?
Absolutely. Well, I've spoken to probably 750,000 people around the world over the last 30 years. And
Wow.
in virtually every one of those events, I ask this simple question that's at the beginning of the book. We'll give away a little bit at the beginning of the book.
Right.
And the question is, what color is a yield sign? And at least 99% of that 750,000 people yelled out yellow. Well, over 45 years ago, the United States switched to the international signage standards, and every yield sign that everyone has seen for 45 years is not yellow, it's red and white. And people always go, what? And that's fun. But here's the question. Why don't we see them? We've seen thousands of yield signs. As you say, you've got a roundabout here. You've seen the same yield signs every day. It's the same way that we see our team every day. Same way we see our industry, our business every day. The same way we see ourselves every day. And yet we haven't seen one of them for what's in front of us. Why? And the reason why this is so important is almost everyone I know rarely uses their vision to see.
Right.
What we use instead is our memory and our conditioning. And whenever we use our memory to see, we don't see what is, we see what was.
Yep.
And the second we lock onto what was, guess what we block out? What is and what could be. And so the reason why I start the book with this focus on, with that question, hopefully get everybody to do exactly what you do and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe it.
Right.
Is because I want people to step back for a second and understand that we've been looking at kindness like an old yellow yield sign. We've been looking at it like we've missed the power of it. We've missed that in the fast food industry. The average annual turnover is 170%.
Wow.
Two companies focus every single dimension of their training, of their orientation, of the way they reward and recognize people on kindness. Those two companies are Chick-fil-A and Starbucks. So in an industry with 170% turnover, and every time somebody has to get turned over, that costs them $6,000.
Right.
Those two companies, their turnover rates, 14% annually at Chick-fil-A, 24% at Starbucks. Kindness rocks.
Yeah, that was so powerful. And when you said, we're not using our vision, we're using our memory and conditioning. I'd love to kind of hear your angle on this, just in terms of talent. I had a very poignant experience with a fellow colleague from several years ago. He was a few years younger, came in as an intern, as a sophomore, intern as a junior, intern as a senior. And we worked with him, and he just became this really talented individual. And he mentioned he wanted to go back to get his MBA. He got into University of Chicago, the Booth School of Management, one of the best programs in the country. And I was in a meeting, and we were talking, and they were referring to this individual who now had over a decade of experience, had an MBA from one of the top programs in the country. And yet I heard them talking about him like he's still this 20-year-old kid. And unfortunately, several months later, he left and they paid him like $70,000 more. And my takeaway was that when they looked at him, they saw a 20-year-old kid as opposed to an incredibly talented, 31-year-old. And I just was really thinking about that when I was reading your book.
Absolutely. Where this really counts to stop using your memory to see or your conditioning is exactly what you just talked about with people. Change the way you look at people. The people you look at change. Change the way you look at yourself. The self you see will change. That's why I wrote this book. I want people to step back and really take a look at, have I been building kindness into my business? Have I been building because here's real kindness. It's easy to be kind to kind people. I mean, it's natural. It's automatic. Yeah. Kindness counts when people are not so kind. Kindness counts when people are are scared. People are uncertain. People don't understand. People are in a tougher place. That's when kindness can leave an indelible imprint of possibility and transform relationships. I learned this from my own daughter. When my daughter went away to college, we missed her so much. But she came home the first time from college, and she had applied for and been accepted to go to a very special service program in Ghana in Africa, because Kelsey, my daughter, wanted to make the world better. Mm-hmm. And I realized at that moment, I'd been looking at her like she's still my little girl.
Right.
But she was a powerful, wise, courageous young woman. And I realized at that moment, I actually saw her for the first time, who she is now, not who I was holding on to. Yeah. So it is a real important insight. And it's fun. It's fun to catch yourself going, oh my gosh. And here's another opposite thing. How many people I've met over the years who say when they first met their husband or their spouse, said, I couldn't stand them. And then something changed because you didn't hold on to that old way of seeing them. Maybe they were shy at first. Maybe they were nervous. And over time, if we just keep our eyes open, we can start looking for the potential in people.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain my wife would 100% agree with that statement there. Well, I'd like you to go in just a little bit about kind of the CKO, what that role is, and being fully present. We find in our industry in construction, we got a couple things that maybe are likely culprits, but we kind of say is number one, it is unfortunately still very currently male dominated, and it's really fast paced. A lot of things are happening. And I just know personally struggle with this, but a lot of folks that we work with really struggle with be here now, be somewhere else later. Can you give us a little context again, kind of tying that back to what the CKO is and
Absolutely.
how we might be able to practice being more fully present?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, the CKO, if you want to build a dynamite construction business, then you want to promote everybody in your business to have them self-promote into the role of CKO. Not everybody's a CEO, but CKO stands for Chief Kindness Officer. Because never forget it. Every interaction that anyone in your organization and your company has with a customer or a prospect or a vendor, to that customer, to that prospect, that individual is the company. That individual is your company. Yeah. And if they have understood the power of kindness, oh my gosh, they have a tremendous opportunity to build your business that you will never have because you're not going to have that same interaction. Mm-hmm. So Chief Kindness Officer is a way of looking at yourself and saying that in every interaction, I'm going to make sure that I abide by what I call the 7 habits of a true CKO. Because it's one thing to be kind. How do you deliver kindness in the most powerful way? And right. Bradley, I could not have laid this out better. You chose the most important ingredient involved in the 7 habits. And it's to be fully present. Mm-hmm. Now, what does that mean? When you're fully present, 100% of your mind, body, and spirit is with the person you're with where they are now. 100% of your mind, body, and spirit with the person you're with where they are now. Now, how many of us have ever been with somebody when we know their body's there, but the rest of them is definitely in another county?
Yes.
And so, sure, all of us. So here's the question. Put yourself in the position of having somebody you really want to be present with you, but they're not. Mm-hmm. How does that make you feel? And for every human being I've ever known, even the most self-confident individuals, if there is somebody we want to be present with us and they're not fully present with us, yeah, it makes us feel worthless. It makes us feel unimportant. It makes us feel small. And the power of being present, probably the greatest human need is the need to know that we matter, that we count, to feel heard. Mm-hmm. And being fully present, you can't fake it. You know when somebody's fully present or not. You can tell in a second. You can even tell over the phone if they're watching ESPN. All right, they are not fully there, and it sends an unmistakable message to that person that they're important. And that is your job building your business. That is your job as a dad. That is your job as a mom. Our job is to help the people we care about to know they're important. Bradley, probably the greatest gift I've ever been given was given me by my 2 daughters, Kelsey and Jenna, when they were 8 and 3. Man, little kids are great teachers. That's true. And I was so caught up in my own stuff that even though I taught this stuff, I was not really present. And one of the most special things when you have young kids is to tuck them in at night, read them a story, spend that present time. Well, because it's a precious window. It won't last forever. Mm-hmm. But night after night, I'd be in my office 2 doors from their bedroom on the phone when I could have been tucking them in. Well, one night, They stood behind me in the doorway, and I could feel their energy behind me. I couldn't hear them. They didn't make any noise. I looked, and there they were. They ran to me. They crawled up in my lap, and they looked at me, and they changed my life. And they said, Daddy, before we go to sleep tonight, can we just ask you something? I said, sure, you can ask me anything. They said, Daddy, we just want to know, do you love your phone more than you love us?
Oh.
Man, I felt the knife go in deep.
Serious. Yes.
See, Emerson said, what you do scream so loudly, I can't hear a word you're saying. And I was living my life as if my phone, and this wasn't even a cell phone. This was a phone that was in a wall in those days. I was living as if my phone was more important than my daughter's.
Yeah.
Well, from that day on, I never missed a chance to tuck them in when I was home. The next morning, I was the one who got them ready for school. And I thought I was doing it for them, Bradley. Do you know, here's the simple truth. Being fully present is the key to being more productive, to getting more done in less time, to building stronger relationships, and it's the only way you can build trust. So how do you do it? Well, inch by inch, anything's a cinch. So here's a great opportunity for everybody on this on your podcast. If you want to start being more fully present, then just start with one person. And for the next 30 days, make the commitment that you'll be more fully present with them. Now, it doesn't mean you have to spend more time with them. You may, by schedule, not have as much time.
Right.
But when you're with them, start by putting the cell phone down. When you're at home, if it's somebody in your family, shut off the television. Do something we hardly ever do, and that is ask more than tell. That's another one of the 7 habits. And then actually listen before you formulate what you're going to say. Because most of the time when we're talking to somebody, we're not really listening to them. We're thinking about what we're going to say.
Right.
We'll know what to say if we just take a little bit longer and listen to them. And they are going to feel incredible. They're going to start looking at you like, they're going to say things like, man, you've been working out, you're looking good. And as you become more present with that first person, it is such a wonderful feeling because it makes you feel like you're really connected to them because you are. And remember, every time you do that, every time you're present, you are communicating beyond words to that person. You matter, you count, you're significant, you're important.
Yeah. That's so powerful. And when you're talking about the issue with the kids, and that I certainly have that experience. And if somebody could have created a diabolical tool that was with us all the time, that was designed to help us not be present, you got it. Yeah, I got mine right here. So do you, right? There's so much benefit from that. But I think it's one of these tools that we just have to be so aware of it. So tied to this, or very closely to this, humility. Question for you, Brian, is, can you teach humility? If so, how, or can it just be modeled? Now let's take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors. Do you ever find yourself annoyed when you have to make a phone call these days? It's Friday evening and you're deciding on dinner. It's your cheat day from that new carnivore diet you're on, exclusively eating beef, bacon, bonobo, bone marrow, Himalayan sea salt, and water. Telling yourself this diet here, this is a good long-term strategy for living. But tonight, you decide you want pizza. You turn to your wife and she says, yeah, you gotta call them. The number's on the magnet on the fridge. What? I gotta call them? And speak to a human? Why? There's no online ordering? Why not? How'd these clowns survive COVID with no online ordering? If it requires a phone call today, it better be unique and precious and complex and easy to screw up. Not like pizza, right? No, and not like lumber either. If you're still making phone calls, being put on hold, listening to Lindo Ronstadt elevator music, wasting time to learn about lumber pricing, you need to experience Materials Exchange. Materials Exchange is the LBM industry's answer to E-Trade. It's simple to view transparent pricing in real time, it's secure, it's easy to order, and it's low cost. So quit relying on phone calls to tell you lumber pricing. See for yourself by registering today at materialsexchange.com. That's the word materials, the letter X, and the word change. When you do register, and again, it's free, use the promo code BRADLEY, BRADLEY, and get your first trade free. There's zero risk, and you get real-time pricing transparency. Materials Exchange is the LBM industry's answer to E-Trade. Materials Exchange is your digital marketplace for lumber and panels.
Well, I think you can teach it, okay. And I definitely think you can model it, and that's probably the best way to teach it.
Okay.
here's the problem with it's another case of a yield sign. Many people actually think humility is weak, that being humble, you can't have confidence. And that's absolutely not true.
Right.
You can have tremendous confidence and be very humble, because being humble doesn't mean it doesn't mean you think less of yourself. It means you think of yourself less.
Yeah.
All right. But the reason why it's so, and this is how we start to build more humility into our culture. The only people who are lifelong learners are people who are humble. And that's why it's so crucial, because only those who are humble always believe that there's a way to get better, a way to grow. There's more to learn. There's more to discover. All right. And so if you want to be the best you can be, and I've had the great joy, I've had 3 great careers. My first career, I was a U.S. swimming coach. I was working with athletes who rose to the absolute top of their sport. The top people were humble. They were confident. They were determined. They were competitive, but they were humble. They really believed they could get better. All right. And so to be a humble person is to be that person who takes responsibility and gives credit. You know, it's amazing what's accomplished when nobody cares who gets the credit. And credit is something you give, responsibility is something you take. So I think the starting place to teach it is to start talking about it. And people don't talk about humility anymore. We are shining a light on people who are tooting their own horns, who are talking about how wonderful they are, how brilliant they are. John Wooden, and the greatest of all time, he never talked about his own accomplishments. In fact, he never even called himself a coach. He said he was a teacher. So look around you for the people who are constantly giving credit. Look around you for the people who are tooting other people's horns, not their own. And start recognizing that as soon as you recognize that there's a chance to get better, all right, you have opened up possibilities in your life and you can grow. So I love that you grabbed a hold of that concept of humility, because it also is a powerful ingredient in kindness. When we're humble, all right, people feel much more open to they feel like they can connect with us. They feel like they can be present with us.
Well, you just said something I think for me really resonated. I think maybe deserves just another repeating. I want to make sure I get this right. You said, take responsibility and give credit. And I think you're right with LinkedIn and Instagram. And for someone who puts out a podcast, and I do, I care that people listen to it. I want more people to listen. I want people to listen to you, but it's a thin line to get caught up in that, right? And then start thinking about, okay, what, the metrics and how that affects my emotion versus just saying, take responsibility, give credit. I just think that's really powerful.
There's a great quote from Coach Bear Bryant, the legend at Alabama. He said, I'm just an old country plowhand. He said, but if I've learned one thing, he says, if you want to get a team's heart to beat as one, he said, when things go great, they did it. Mm-hmm. Things go pretty good, we did it. Things go bad, I did it.
Right.
In other words, I got to change me. Imagine how if you were a leader of your organization and when things go south a little bit for a while, you make some mistakes, things are tough. Instead of blaming everybody else, you step up and say, I got to be better. I got to grow. You're going to have a team that will run through fire for you. And it's also in a tremendous way for that to build that same quality in themselves. Another one that I've always treasured, this will show my age, in the 1960 Olympics, there was a woman named Wilma Rudolph, who was the greatest sprinter of all. She won 3 gold medals in 1960. Well, when Wilma Rudolph was a young girl, she had polio. And she started running track to just try to be able to get balance and walk in. Her first 200 races in track, she finished last. And she went on to become the greatest sprinter of her time, one of the greatest of all time. But this woman who went through incredibly tough times, here's what she said. She says, no matter what you accomplish in life, never forget somebody always helps you. That's humility. And that's what separates those. And we need to get that back. We need to become a humble nation again. We need to become humble in our businesses and in our families and teach it everywhere we can. And if we do that, we'll constantly be moving to get better. Instead, we'll be more concerned with our character than our reputation. Mm-hmm. See, our character is who you are. Your reputation is just what others think you are.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me too of Warren Buffett. And a lot of people just read his annual report, even if you don't own any shares of Berkshire Hathaway. And he regularly, when things don't go well and they acquire a business or something happens, he sits up there and says, yeah, I was dumb. I made a bad mistake. And people will revere him for those sorts of things. or just kind of his overall performance of his companies, yet often overlook that. And I think just to your point, just highlighting that where we see it of people we admire can be really powerful. The one thing I'd love for you to talk about, Brian, that I haven't stopped thinking about since you mentioned it was this principle of exaggeration. I thought it was so subtle, but for me, and I've been trying to practice it and maybe a little bit clumsily. I'm sure there's some people around me like, what's he doing? That's different. But would you mind going into detail just a little bit about the principle of exaggeration?
Absolutely. It's a great way. The idea of it is to help you break through a place where you become caught up in what I'll call a confinement zone. Comfort zones sometimes become confinement zones. So the way it came about in my own career is when I was a swimming coach, I would have athletes who had a high arm carriage above water, but when they put their hand in the water, they pulled in a wide arm carriage in relation to their body line. Okay. When you swim, you want to pull down the center line of your body underneath you, because that's where you have the maximum leverage and power. But if I said to a swimmer who I can clearly see, pull down the center line of your body because you're pulling outside, you know what they always said to me, Bradley? They never said I can't, Bradley. They always said I am, because it felt normal. Whatever you do that have gotten to a comfort zone feels right. And you want to do it right. So it did me no good to say to that athlete, pull down the center line of your body. They looked at me like, what? You need glasses, coach? I am. So how can I help them?
Yeah.
I would say to them, when your right hand hits the water, I want you to pull it so far across your body to your left, as far as you can. And then with your left hand, as far as you can across to your right. And as soon as I had them do that, guess what they did? They pulled right down the center line of their body. But now they felt the difference. So I use this when I'm helping people to develop their speaking. I have them practice on your own, being flamboyant, moving more, or changing your voice with more. Absolutely stretch those boundaries. The principle of exaggeration is a way to stretch your boundaries so that when they come back, they've grown a little bit.
Yeah.
You move beyond where you were stuck. All right. And it's a very powerful way to understand that we can change, but sometimes we have to make that change so significant that we feel the difference. Otherwise, we'll slip right back into the old way.
Yeah. So can you tie that to directly how maybe like a behavioral change or something they can do as it relates specifically to kindness and leadership in the workplace?
Absolutely. You can start to use the power of surprise. That's a great way to do it. You know, today we are so caught up in technology that our communication is almost all on that thing we held up before, our cell phone. Right. It's email, it's text, it's this, it's that. Start by doing something that you've not done in a while, and that is write some handwritten cards. People will go, what? All right, is your computer down? All right, but it will stretch you to step back for a minute and exaggerate the process of recognizing and acknowledging people. Another one that you can use that is a really powerful way to expand your ability to really use recognition, acknowledgement, and appreciation to build people, build teams, and build relationships. And that is start to catch people and recognize them for their effort and energy and not just their results. We've been conditioned in work in the same way we've been conditioned to think yield signs are yellow. We've been conditioned to only give praise when the job's done, when we've hit the number, when we've achieved what we set out to do. Now, you always want to do that. You always want to acknowledge great performance. But if you want to rock your team, if you want to build a team, then be more cognizant to catch them for their effort and their energy and their attitude before they get to the results. Because now they're focusing on what they control instead of what they don't control. And then pretty soon they're going to do that. Great example. You and I both believe the greatest coach of all time, John Wooden, 27 years at UCLA, the man never said the words winning or losing to his players. He never said the words.
Really?
Now, did he want to win? Oh, yeah.
For sure.
But what he wanted was for his players, his coaches, and himself to focus on what they controlled, which was not the ultimate score. They controlled what they put in to get to that score. And so all of his acknowledgement wasn't necessarily about making the shot. It was about setting the good pick. It was about taking the good shot. It was about being a good teammate. It was the things that they controlled. So if you thank, acknowledge, appreciate, deliver kindness to people for what they control, their effort, their energy, their attitude, they're going to start creating more results.
Well, as soon as you said that, with our children, my wife and I try to be very intentional about recognizing effort and separate that from results. However, as soon as you said that, I'm like, that, for whatever reason, that mindset never really carried over into business with my team. So as soon as you said that, I'm like, yeah, it's maybe one of those insights to the obvious, but I think that's something that I'm probably not the only person who's listening to overlook. Brian, this has been great. If I'm not careful here, I'll take up your entire afternoon here. One more thing before I want to make it sure we're not burying the lead, make it really obvious where people can, honestly buy dozens of these books to hand them out to everyone. But you are known as America's breakthrough coach. I did one of those things where it was on your website, learn more about your bio, make sure I knew what I knew about you, and just found myself getting sucked in, watching different videos. And I think I spent over an hour on your website there. Can you share with the audience here, if you're helping folks engineer a breakthrough and really go from where they are now to where they want to be in the future, are there specific questions that you start with that maybe listeners can ask themselves to start inching their way forward out of maybe a rut that they're in right now?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think there are some really important ones. The first that I would ask myself is, what is leadership? All right. And many people think that another conditioning, another yellow yield sign. So many people believe there are leaders and followers. Part of my mission in life is to help everyone know that you are the CEO of your own life, that every one of us is a leader. And that as soon as you ask, what is leadership, it becomes clear that you are a leader, because leadership is nothing more than making decisions. Every decision you make is an act of personal leadership. How do you show up every day? That's leadership. What kind of impact do you have on the people around you? You just lift them up by who you are. That's leadership. In the last year and a half, as we've all dealt with something we've never had in our lifetimes, how do you deal with adversity, with challenge, with change? You're constantly impacting people, but you're constantly a leader because you're making choices. So understand that what is leadership? Leadership is making choices. And when you look at leadership that way, you recognize, hey, I am a leader. Secondly, I want to ask yourself, what is the greatest gift I can give to another person? And to me, it's what we talked about. It's to be more fully present, because that's the one that will help them know that they're significant. I'd say the last one to ask yourself is, this is a fun way to really build some momentum in your life. For a couple days, ask yourself how often you say these words to yourself: I have to do something. How many times do you say, I have to do something? And then I'm going to ask you a question. What do you really have to do?
Right.
I can only think of one thing: die. Everything else is a matter of choice. Now, everything has consequences.
Right.
And some people would say even dying is a matter of choice. But when you come from a place that what I do is a choice, and you replace I have to with I want to, choose to, like to, decide to, transforms the way you go at life. Because we learned I have to when we were little kids. And we learned it because our parents wanted us to be safe. There was a good reason for it. But there were usually two words attached to I have to. And those two words were or else. Something's going to happen.
Right.
Something you don't want to have happen. Well, as we get older, the or else may disappear, but the condition of it is stuck in there. Yeah. And so when we say I have to, we give up choice, and it comes from a place of fear. So when you change it to I want to, choose to, even I have to get some sleep. No, I choose to get some sleep. Then you start to develop that you're moving towards what you want to create in your life. So there's a few different things right there.
Well, yeah, after the first one, I mean, having a podcast that we have, one of ours is the construction leadership podcast. Obviously, we're talking about leadership, but when you say, all right, what is leadership? Write it down. All of a sudden, you kind of sit back a minute and be like, well, that's an interesting question, not that simple. So the three questions I think are really powerful. What is leadership? What's the greatest gift that we can give to someone else? And how often do we say, I have to do something?
Let me give you one more to start every day with. So a great way to live a great life is to live every day with intention. So when you wake up in the morning, you want to change your life, ask yourself this one question each morning. What am I truly grateful about in my life?
Yeah.
What am I truly grateful about in my life? Emotions, as human beings, we are electrical entities. All right. So every emotion has a frequency. The highest frequency emotion has been measured is gratitude. So when you are in a state of gratitude, you can't be overwhelmed by negative emotions. Right? And when you live with that sense of gratitude, it radiates to other people, and it helps them elevate their frequency as well.
Yeah, we had a wonderful woman on the podcast a while ago, and she was in construction management within NASA and was building things that would go into space. And she was talking about this phrase about being on the same wavelength as someone. And that comes from physics and being literally our brainwaves are matching with someone else. And I was like, I'm not sure if that's intuitive or that's something I knew, but it's certainly not something I thought about. But I think that really fits with what you're saying.
Absolutely. We want to elevate our frequency and we'll live with a sense of gratitude, live with that sense of humility, and just let's deliver more kindness. We can disagree without being disagreeable. Coach Wooden was right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. Before I do, again, and maybe just go into a little bit, maybe just I'll describe this book a little bit. I love the different colors. You have images. And, I think if I was just reading this front to back, I don't know, maybe I'm a slow reader, half hour, 45 minutes. But this is a book that I think is almost one of these leadership coffee table books that if it's around, I found myself just referring to it and saying, okay, how can I be more intentional in how I lead in this situation? What do I need to remind myself? Manage my emotions. So again, and it's funny as I didn't immediately recognize the name Mac Anderson, but having read, the 212th Degree, it's like that sort of book. But I also think this is one tailor-made where you're buying 100 for every single one employee and have it be something you talk about. Brian, I'm going to quit rambling here. Where can people learn more about you, your book, and where to get it?
Well, thanks so much for that. I really appreciate it. That's why I wanted to write a book that would be readable today. Yeah. And this is a book that younger people will read because it's a quick read, but there's a lot in it and some great stories too. And stories really have transformation. So the best way to learn about me and you can get the book here as well. And my speaking is just my website. It's www.brianbiro.com, BRIANBIRO. I love it when people connect with me. I'll always get back to you. So my website, brianbiro.com. For the book, you can get the book from my website. And the other place you can get it right now, we're kind of exclusive with it right now. We're probably going to boost it out into the mainstream in a while. You can't get it on Amazon right now, but you can go to inspirekindness.com. Okay. And that's another place to order it. So either my website or inspirekindness.com. And, I do hope we start a bit of a kindness revolution.
We need it. I'm all in. And, you've already started helping me. So again, thanks for your time. Thanks for writing the book and appreciate everything. Thank you.
Hey, Bradley, I really loved it. We could go for another 3 days.
Not a problem. All right. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, then. How did that go? I didn't oversell it, did I? In editing this episode, I listened to it multiple times, and each time I walked away with something else that I found I could apply immediately in my own business and in my family, if I'm being very honest, which I am. I'm being honest. Our goal here is to make this the best podcast you listen to, so I'd love to hear your thoughts, ideas for future shows or future guests. Also, if you're struggling with any sort of builder-related issues, do not hesitate to reach out to me directly at Bradley@BehindYourBackSales.com. Again, that's Bradley@BehindYourBackSales.com. Feel free to link up with me on LinkedIn and connect on Instagram at BehindYourBackCEO. Now, if you found this episode valuable, please share it with your network and leave a review. Those mean more to us than you could know. So thanks to our sponsors. You can learn more about Boise Cascade's engineered wood products and their innovative Sawtech technology by visiting bc.com/EWP, and our friends at Materials Exchange. What E-Trade is for the stock market, Materials Exchange is to the LBM industry. They make commodity pricing transparent, buying simple, and the fees are low. So with that, we're going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first and test these out. Try this out. Experiment with the return on investment for kindness today. As always, thank you for listening.